This morning we're honored to have with us Dr. Yizhar Hess, who is the vice chairman of the World Zionist Organization. I mentioned the play that the WZO sponsored on Thursday night. That play will be performed again this evening. And once again, I want to thank Anna and Adam, the Pavishcherovs, for allowing us to see that play. It was the first time it was performed in English for a full audience here in the States, and really delighted that we were able to bring that to you here in the sanctuary. Yizhar, as I understand it, is not related to the Hesses of Baltimore. We were talking about them earlier. He is related to Amira Hess, Zichrona Livracha, who just passed away yesterday. It was Yizhar's aunt at 80 years old after a battle with cancer. And Amira Hess is a really renowned Israeli poet and a great loss to Hebrew literature and to the state of Israel, but I know also very personal to you, Yizhar, and our condolences are with you as you remember her. Yizhar earned a BA in political science in Hebrew literature at Hebrew University. He also has a law degree and is a member of the Israeli Bar. He holds an MA in Jewish Studies from the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem and a PhD in Sociology and Education from Sussex University in Brighton, England. He's a regular contributor to the Israeli press. You may have read op-eds that he's written or seen interviews with him. Subjects of religion and state are near and dear to his heart. He's the co-editor of the book Questions About God, published by Mariv. For 13 years, between 2007 and 2020, Yizhar served as the executive director of the Masorti movement in Israel, which is part of the worldwide conservative Masorti movement, dedicated not only to the furthering of our particular movement, but also in general to egalitarian principles and a pluralistic vision for Israel and for Judaism. Yizhar spoke on Thursday night about how the play about Heschel was really first conceived as a way of introducing Israelis to this seminal American Jewish figure, and Israelis are really not knowledgeable about Abraham Joshua Heschel, and so the play was originally done in Hebrew for that vision, and Yizhar and the WZO's goal of not only educating diaspora Jewry about Israel, but also Israelis about the importance of and the history of diaspora Jewry as well. Yizhar represented the Masorti movement in negotiations with the Israeli government regarding the egalitarian prayer section at the Kotel, an ongoing battle. And he's one of the leading voices in Israel promoting Jewish pluralism. He's a 10th generation Jerusalemite. He lives today in Modi'in, appropriate for Hanukkah, with his wife Yael, and who is a former colonel in the IDF, and their two children, Achiad and Micha. And I know that one of your children is serving in Gaza right now, and our thoughts are certainly with you, because I know things have started up. Without further ado, it's my honor to welcome Dr. Yizhar Hess to the Bima.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
On October 7th, our son Achiad was not in Israel, he was in Nepal. He just graduated the first year of his studies at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. It's the end of the summer break, and he thought it would be great to spend a few weeks in Nepal tracking whatever he can. He didn't hear about the catastrophe in the Gaza envelope until Sunday, because on Shabbat they were walking and it wasn't in a place with internet. They learned only on Sunday, when they reached a guest house with other Israelis, that a war broke out in Israel during Shabbat. The one thing that he knew that he'll be doing is coming back to Israel as soon as he can. And for the next 4 days, he was working on it. They had to walk another day until the nearest road, then to order a jeep that would take them for another 2 days on a bumpy road up to a place where they can they can take a train to Timbuktu, and from Timbuktu to look for the easiest way to get to Israel, they bought a ticket via India to Tel Aviv, only to learn that in order to fly via India, you need an India visa. Then they had to buy another ticket via Dubai. 4 days later, on Thursday, they landed in Tel Aviv, exhausted. They had a quick meal with us and took a shower, and Achiad went straight to his unit. Ever since then, as Rabbi Berg mentioned, he's in Gaza. We managed to see him a few times during the last 52 days, but mainly he is back and forth from different spots in Gaza. Thank God, Achiad was not in Israel on October 7th. Because if he were in Israel on October 7th, I'm sure that after 2 hours, he would have been on the border of Gaza. He would have rushed from home to his unit, would have taken the rifle that he could put his hand on, and rushing back and rushing to the border of Gaza. And statistically, we know that the soldiers who did it, many of them did not survive. So thank God Achiad was not in Israel on October 7th. The catastrophe that we had 52 years ago in Israel is a catastrophe that will be remembered for decades. Because it wasn't a catastrophe of one dimension only, it had multiple aspects. It was a military failure, it was a leadership failure, it was a failure of our strategic and security doctrine for 2 decades that simply collapsed in front of our eyes. And it was also a failure in a way, and it's hard to say it, but it was a failure of Zionism. We promised ourselves never again. We promised ourselves that we will never have a pogrom again, and Zionism got a hit on that Shabbat morning. In any aspect, it was a pogrom. Jews died without Israelis in Israel. Jews died without the IDF protecting them. Yes, there were soldiers fighting on that Shabbat, but there was no IDF. There were Israelis fighting for their lives, but there was no state of Israel. This is something that we thought that we will never experience. It will take us decades to cope with this failure, and this is something that we need to be very blunt about. What we know already, that we will have a different Israel after October 7th. By the way, the date in Israel is still October 7th. We are not done with October 7th yet, but I'm sure Israel will be a different country after October 7th, on October 8th, when this war is over. Remember how we got into that war, how Israel looked like in the previous year, when we were rallying in the streets to defend our democracies. Many of us, me included, every Saturday night we were in the streets of Tel Aviv and in Modi'in and of Jerusalem, in many places in Israel, carrying the Israeli flag and crying out loud for our democracy. It was a painful year, the 75th year since the establishment of the State of Israel. It was a painful year. We entered this war after a year of disputes, internal disputes, against a threat to change the DNA of Zionism, against a threat to change the equation of Jewish and democratic in a way that would not protect the democratic nature of the State of Israel. The one good point that I could see in the previous year prior to the war is the fact that when people were protecting their democracy, when we protected our democracy, and Achiad included, Achiad, every Motzei Shabbat, he would have come with us, of course, to these rallies. We could be proud of the fact that after many years, people were holding the Israeli flag. That was one of the symbols of this wave of demonstrations to protect Israel's democracy. And it's not by coincidence. It was, in a very moving way, redefining Zionism. We need to get back to the fundamentals of Zionism, and I'm sure that on October 8th, after this war is over, not only the state of Israel will be a different place, also the defining of what Zionism means in our era would be something different. We need to go back to the fundamentals, to the very basics of the beginning. And I'm talking about going back to the beginning of Zionism. And I'd like to mention in that context, Theodor Herzl. Herzl was not the first Zionist. The first Zionist Congress was convened in what city? Basel, in the year of 1897. But we know that Zionism, modern Zionism, began 15 years earlier. The first wave of Aliyah to Israel was in 1882, 15 years earlier. So Herzl, as much as important as he was not the first Zionist. When he convened the Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897, he created a new dimension of what Zionism means, a critical component that he brought to the table. What Herzl did to Zionism is to politicize the idea. Herzl politicized the Zionist endeavor. He introduced politics and introduced democracy into the Zionist movement, and he was quite effective with the introduction of politics into the Zionist idea. How effective? Less than 50 years after he passed away, the State of Israel was established. And Herzl passed away as a young fella, 44. Less than 50 years after he passed away, the State of Israel was established. So he introduced the political mechanism in a very effective way. And one of the core elements of the politics that he introduced was democracy. To the first Zionist Congress in 1897, there were 209 delegates. That's all. Zionism was represented, a minority of a minority in the Jewish people. Only 209 delegates came to the first Zionist Congress. They were all invitees of Herzl. Yet from the second Congress on, in order to come, you needed to be elected. You had to have a constituency, the homework that the delegates got in the first Zionist Congress, to go back to their hometowns, to their cities, to establish Zionist federations, and to be elected or not in order to come to the second Congress. You had to have a constituency. What a core element of democracy. You have to be, in order to be a shliach tzibur, you need a tzibur. The second that I'm so proud of was the right of women to vote and to be elected. From the second Congress on, when we had elections, women could vote and could be elected. So it's 1888. Just let's remind ourselves when other countries gave women the right to vote and to get elected. In the US, in Canada, in England. The last country was Switzerland in 1972, that women got the right to vote. So there are reasons, A, to celebrate the democratic nature of Zionism, but also to remind ourselves that it's so important in the Zionist endeavor that these elements, these core values of the democratic entity, the political democratic entity that Herzl introduced and changed the Jewish history by taking the Zionist movement in that path. So when I'm talking about the new Israel that we need to establish after October 7th, in the metaphoric day of October 8th, it must be a strong country that knows how to defend itself. It must be a strong country that knows how to save its democracy. And one of the things that Herzl left us with is that mechanism of involvement. The World Zionist Congress that Herzl established is a democratic entity, an entity that has a representation of world Jewry. And I'm stressing this point because in order to build the new Israel that we need on October 8th, Chaverim, we need you. You who sit here, you who do not live in Israel, but who care for Israel. The democratic entity that Herzl left us with allows you not only to have a voice when it comes to Israel, but also to have a vote when it comes to Israel. Every 5 years, there are elections to the World Zionist Organization. It's not a fundraising arm, okay? It's the political arm that Herzl left us with that allows Jews in the diaspora to be involved in what Israel is, in what Israel do, in how Israel allocates budgets or decides policies in a way, in a democratic way that gives you, Jews who live outside of Israel, to be effectively meaningful in rebuilding the Israel that we need on October 8th. Now, unfortunately, this best-kept secret that I just shared with you, that every 5 years there are elections, basically represents the apathy that we felt in the last elections to the World Zionist Congress. In the last elections to the World Zionist Congress, only 125,000 Jews in North America bothered to vote. There are 8 million Jews living in North America. Only 125,000 bothered to vote. And unfortunately, the way people voted does not represent the way the American Jewish community is. 20% of the people who voted were Haredim. So in a way, when you come today to the Congress and you see who represents North American Jewry, you might think that 20% of North American Jewry are Haredim. This is evidently not the case. And we need to make sure when we build the new Israeli society, when we build the new way, the fabric that needs to be built of the Israeli society on October 8th, we need to make sure that you are represented well. Everyone in Israel now feels a moment of unity. This is true. I'm so proud of it. You know, in this week's parasha, we learned that Yaakov gets a new name. Instead of Yaakov, he gets the name Yisrael. So we will not be changing the name of Israel, of course, but we will be working strongly in the next few years after the war about the core values of our society. And Israel, in my eyes, is too big and too dear to be left only with Israelis. Okay, it's the involvement of world Jewry that needs to be there in order to protect Jewish pluralism in Israel, in order to protect inclusivity in the society of Israel, in order to protect the very fact that we are the nation state of the Jewish people, and without being a vibrant democracy, I'm not sure that we will be able to celebrate proudly the 150 years of the State of Israel, 75 years from now. So my message here this morning, on behalf of me as the Vice Chairman of the World Zionist Organization representing you, I'm the senior representative of Merkaz, it's the Masorti conservative slate to the Zionist Congress, but not only me myself, but from the bottom of the heart of so many Israelis, and Achiad, our son, included, is to welcome you to be involved when it comes to Israel issues. Raise your voice, speak up, even in a critical way. I'm so proud that your rabbi, Rabbi Berg, was one of the leaders who demonstrated in DC when Minister Smotrich was there just a few months ago. Because taking Israel seriously is also speaking up when you think that something is wrong being conducted by the government of Israel. This is a good show of the love of Israel. We need a strong Israel, but we need a strong diaspora as well. It would make Israel stronger. I'd like to thank you so much for having me this morning. I'd like to thank you, Rabbi Berg, for allowing us to have Heschel's play on Thursday evening here in this magnificent sanctuary. And I hope to be here again in good times. It is a painful time today in Israel, but I'm sure that the future will be much, much better. Shabbat Shalom.